I'm very happy to be back at Ajahn International School. The school has expanded more than double the size since I was last here, about 5 or 6 years ago. And so it's very impressive to see all the changes. So, and also there is now a secondary school that has come into being since I was last here in the area. So this is wonderful to see these developments. Thinking about the fact it's very much an international school now, many different nationalities, people from different backgrounds, different experience, different languages. I thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about communication and the importance of communication and understanding each other to the degree that we can. So I think it's probably relevant to life here at Ajahn, both for the students and the teachers and the administration and the families and everybody. It's a big group now, as I said, with 500 students, 150 staff, and all the parents. That's about a good 1,000 or so people. So communication between these many hundreds of people is very significant. Many years ago, when I was at university, I studied psychology and physiology. And one of the things that caught my attention was in the course on the psychology of language. It started off with telling a story about this particular man, and he started life as an insurance adjuster, which sounds like a really boring occupation. So he goes around to different companies, different places, and works out how much insurance they should pay. So one day he had this job. He had to go to a petrol station, a gas station, where they had a huge explosion. And he was trying to assess whose fault it was and whether the insurance company should pay up. And so the whole place had been blown up by this massive explosion. And he asked the staff there, so what happened? The whole place is completely wrecked. The buildings are destroyed. All the underground tanks are blown up. What happened? And whose fault was it? And so then he was asking the managers, he was asking the workers, and then he finally spoke to the worker who'd been the one who actually caused the accident. And he said, the worker said to him, well, there are these big underground tanks, and we'd opened up this big tank, and it was empty. And so I, not really thinking about it very much, I thought, well, the tank is empty. I was smoking a cigarette, so I just flicked the butt of my cigarette into the empty tank. And amazingly, there was this gigantic explosion. So this man was very lucky to be alive, blown up and carried away by the explosion. And so Mr. Worf, the insurance adjuster, said, well, didn't it occur to you that even though there was no petrol, there was no gasoline in this gigantic tank with many hundreds of liters, thousands of liters, didn't it occur to you that it was actually full of the fumes, the gas that comes from the petrol? No, it was empty. It was an empty tank. And then this caught the attention of this man. But that's interesting. He thinks it's empty, therefore safe to flick in a cigarette. But someone who understands how petrol works would realize, no, it's absolutely full of fumes, which are very explosive. And you should definitely not have any fire nearby them. And so he thought, that's really interesting. Just because of the different way you understand something and the way you phrase it in your mind, then you get a very different result. If he had the idea, it's full of very explosive fumes, therefore put the cigarette out immediately and don't have any fire nearby. But he didn't. He thought, oh, it's empty because he labeled it as having no petrol. So that got him out of the insurance business and into the psychology of language. So that story stuck with me all these years because it's so relevant to our human world, how we hear one thing and understand another. And we can say find so many difficulties and conflicts between ourselves, people in our classes, between parents and children, between teachers and students, and between teachers and teachers and staff, and everybody in the world, because we believe our own definitions. We think in our own words, and we don't consider that we are creating a particular pattern. We are creating a particular idea of the world through our language and through our thinking. So if we want to establish a greater quality of harmony, able to work together, have a more comfortable studying environment, working environment, teaching environment, then there needs to be, insofar as the Buddha's teaching is concerned, there needs to be a greater flexibility, what we would call mindfulness and full awareness, or intuitive awareness, sati sampajanya. There needs to be more of that wide, reflective awareness that says, hey, wait a minute, well, I think of it in this way, what do the others think? I call it this, what do the others call it? In one of the Buddha's teachings called the Discourse on Non-Conflict, he uses a really good example. He says, if you adhere you stick to your own ideas, your own way of speaking, and you think everybody's wrong, you end up, people are always in conflict. He said, you can take the same thing, it's not very big, but if you pick up a little, something like this, and he said, yeah, in Uttarakuru they call this a dish, in Magadha they call it a bowl, in Kosala they call it a saucer, in Amsa they call it a pot. He goes through this whole list of different words used for the same thing in about 9 different countries and regions. And he says, it's all the same object, but there are these 9 different words that are used to refer to it. So if I think, no, it's not a pot, it's a saucer. No, it's not a bowl, it's a dish. And then we end up fighting with each other. So this is called the Discourse on Non-Conflict. It's, I think, Sutta number 100, we have a Buddhist Studies section here, Sutta number 139 in the middle-length discourses for the Dhamma nerds amongst us. So I feel that's a very, very helpful thing to bear in mind, because the Buddha says this is about non-conflict. So if you bear in mind, well, I call it a saucer, but that's not the only way to talk about it. I call this beautiful, but other people think it's ugly. I call this something that's say, appropriate or helpful. Other people see it's not helpful. So just because I see it this way, how can that possibly be the whole story? So I did feel it's very, very helpful to bear this in mind. We have many different nationalities, many different languages, many different backgrounds here, and the way that we can learn to listen to each other and to not immediately jump to conclusions when you hear something that you don't assume. Oh, this is the reality. This is the truth. Just yesterday, we finished leading a 10-day meditation retreat up in Chiang Mai province, up in the hills north of Chiang Rai. And one of the things I was talking about a lot was the same kind of area, and how when the Buddha defined what the world is, we might think, well, the world is the planet Earth. It's the solar system, it's the sun, the moon, and the stars, and it's the mountains and rivers, the trees and the ground, the earth, or the people from the different countries, or the animals, creatures, birds, fishes, insects, microscopic creatures. And this is the world. So that's how we would generally think. And you probably have lessons in geography and biology and physics and chemistry and maybe astronomy. So they think, well, that's the world. But the Buddha made a very different definition. He said it's what we call the world in his teaching is the world of our own experience. So he said that the way that we are perceiving the world and creating the world, that's what is called the world in his teaching. And what is that? The way that we see and know the world, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. So what that means is that each of us doesn't experience the world, so I'm putting this forward as a proposition, you can argue with me for that. None of us experience the world. So maybe you think, well, actually, I'm very observant, I'm very accurate, my thoughts are very precise, I know a lot, I understand a lot, so I know the world as it actually is. You might have that thought, and good for you if you have that thought. But I would suggest that none of us experience the world. Every single one of us, from the youngest to the oldest, from whatever country we're from, each of us experiences our mind's version of the world, based on our language, our family, our education, our past experience. Are you an artistic type? Are you a mathematical type? Are you a biology type? Are you a caring for animals type? What do you see when you come into a room? Are you an architect? So when Marcus comes in here, he knows he designed this building, he built it. And he probably knows each piece of bamboo personally. So when Marcus comes in here, he's aware that he thought of this building and he created it. And so this building sits in his mind in a different way. And those of you who are sort of newly arrived students, they think, oh, this is the big hall, come in, sit down, where am I supposed to sit? Okay, that's where I sit, and that's it. And so if you're a bird flying around, then you're looking for your breakfast and think, well, shall I go in there? No, it's not very interesting. Well, they wouldn't think in English. But, they would swing past, but there's probably nothing very interesting to eat in this space, so they would fly on by. So the Marcus and the student and the bird, they all experience the same space in very different ways. So the reason why I would say that this is significant, very important for us, I think that's all a bit theoretical. So if I recognize that my world is not, it cannot possibly be the same as your world, then if I remember that, then I'm much more able to make space for you to see things differently. When I say, oh, this is delicious, I don't assume that somebody else is going to think this is delicious. When I say I set up the shrine in a particular way, then I think, well, that looks good, and then that it could be the case that somebody goes, oh, no. So, just as an example, two or 3 weeks ago, we had a really big festival at Amaro Monastery in England. It was the 90th birthday year of our founder and teacher, Ajahn. So many of the senior monks and the nuns community from around the world came and gathered. And one of the things that was given was a very beautiful sculpture of Venerable Ajahn, our teacher from Northeast Thailand. And I thought, oh, we've never had a very nice, beautiful, what they call a rupman, a kind of image of Longpa Cha. We should find a special place for this. Why don't we put it on the main shrine in the temple? So I discussed that with one of the other senior monks. Ajahn Sumedho's attendant and secretary, and said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Well, let's just put it there and see how it looks and then just test it out. So we put it there, right in the middle of the shrine, in front of the Buddha image, and there's a picture of Ajahn Chah on one side, his teacher, Ajahn Wan, on the other. We thought, oh yeah, well maybe the photographs would go away, but that was a perfect place for the Ajahn Chah image. Let's just leave it there for a few days and test it out, see what people think. About 2 hours later, I went back into the temple. It was already gone. Another of the senior monks had seen it. No. We can't put it there. No, we have to have a community meeting. We've got to decide on this. We can't rearrange everything without consulting. So I have thought, that's a perfect place. Somebody else has thought, that's not a perfect place. And we're brother monks, and we respect each other very much. But a completely different perspective, different views that this shouldn't be there yet, or shouldn't be put there without a major reconfiguring of the whole shrine. So, if we bear in mind that everybody else sees things differently, then we have a lot more compassion and a lot more, we give space to each other. If I assume that what I think is true, every thought I have is true and meaningful, and if other people agree with me, then they're right. if they disagree with me, then they're wrong, and probably stupid, then we end up with a lot of conflict, right? But if I assume everything that I think is true, and that's the only version of reality, then if someone thinks differently, then they've got to be wrong, haven't they? That makes sense. But if we say, well, that's my version of truth, I think that's a good place to be in. Yeah, I think this is beautiful, I think this is right, but let's see what other people think. My perception is just my mind's version of the world. It's not the world, it's just my mind's version of the world. Now, the more that we can respect the perceptions, the points of view of others, then the more we can live harmoniously together. We can really appreciate that. The more that we assume that we are right, and this is where intelligence and having a lot of information is a bit of an obstruction. Because you can make a case that if you can explain why you are right, and you convince yourself why you're right, then your intelligence then becomes an obstacle, because you can get more and more attached to your own opinion, your own point of view, your own rightness, and you end up being in greater conflict. Living in the human world, the younger students maybe you haven't come across this so much, but certainly for the adults, I think we will be very familiar with that, is that you can be really attached to your own rightness. A story that Ajahn Sumedho would tell about when he was a young monk was that in Thailand, as we know, that in Thai society people are generally very polite, very gracious, very much like to avoid conflict and confrontation. And this was about 50 years ago now, was Ajahn Sumedho, our teacher, found there was a young monk, a new monk arrived at his main monastery, Ajahn Chah's monastery, and he was very loud and very aggressive in his speech. He used really bad language, and so his speech habits were really, ugly and divisive. People were getting really upset with the way he spoke and how he spoke and the language he used. And to the young Ajahn Sumedho's indignation or amazement, being a kind of self-righteous American, he couldn't understand why Ajahn Chah wasn't correcting this guy, setting him straight, saying, he's a junior monk, you shouldn't be talking like that, it's really outrageous. Being so rude, so vulgar, so aggressive, it's terrible. Why doesn't the Ajahn say something? And several weeks went by with this, the monk with the bad speech habits was carrying on living there. So Ajahn Chah went away for a little while, and the young Ajahn Sumedho thought, okay, this is my opportunity. So after the fortnightly recitation, he decided to bring it up. Ajahn Chah wasn't there. He thought, if the Ajahn not going to bring it up, I will. Again, being very Phra, self-righteous, reasonable Phra, even though he was very junior. There was lots more senior people for him, so he didn't realize quite how unusual it was for a junior person to speak up in a very forthright way. Anyway, so he criticized this monk in front of the whole of the rest of the community, the other monks sitting there. And he went through all these different incidents. On this day you said this, and then you were very rude to that person. You used really bad language talking with this person, with the lay people, and he had his list, and his facts were correct. And all this time, the other monk, the loudmouth monk, was sitting looking at the mat. And at the end of this, what they call a diatribe, this long string of criticisms, then Ajahn Sumedho thought, very good. I really said everything that needed to be said. At last, somebody said something. Very good. And I think it was Ajahn Liam was the monk looking after the group of Ajahn Chah was where he said, well, thank you very much, Ajahn Sumedho. Anything else to discuss? And they finished the meeting. So then a day or two later, the monk with the bad, unskillful speech habits, he vanished, he packed his things and disappeared. A week or two later, Ajahn Chah came back, and news reached him very quickly about how the young Ajahn Sumedho had spoken up very confrontationally at this meeting, and how the loud-mouthed monk had vanished shortly after. And then Ajahn took a quiet moment and called him, the young Ajahn Sumedho over and said, Ajahn Sumedho, what you did at that meeting, that was really incorrect, inappropriate. Did you think I didn't notice that monk's bad speech habits? You really think I wasn't aware of it? Of course I was. It's impossible to miss. But he'd been kicked out of every other monastery he'd ever been in. And this was the last place he could go. I had decided to make space for him, and now you closed that door on him. And then what he said was really a very memorable phrase, and I think it's probably useful for the staff and the students and everybody here, is he said, you were right in fact, but wrong in Dhamma. So your facts were correct. You had all the information, yes, that was said. And he did do that, he did say that. But the whole way you were approaching it, that was really out of harmony with what is beautiful, what is noble, what is kind and compassionate. And so you were right in fact, but wrong in Dhamma. So that's a really useful phrase to remember. Being one who likes to collect facts, I used to read encyclopedias when I was a kid. I wanted to have all the information about everything in the universe. So I always have an answer for everything. So I'm a kind of information junkie. So I can relate to that. So it's having your information correct and having a logical idea about how you see things, how you think things should be. That's not the whole story. So as well as being right in fact, and in our opinions, it's important to consider, well, where's the other person at? How are they feeling? How important is this to them? What's their perspective? Do they think in a different way to me? So if we can just stop and expand our view to have more of that sampajanya, that complete picture, and consider, how does the other person relate to this? What else is there in the picture that I'm not taking account of? What else is there to consider? Then, with that little bit of extra space, just pausing, thinking, considering, putting yourself into the other person's shoes, and then we can speak, then we can act. Then we find ourselves much more able to get on with our fellow students, or between students and the teachers, the students and their parents, and teachers and the administration, and everybody with everybody. So I heartily encourage this kind of pausing, considering, and recognizing that I don't experience the world, I experience my mind's version of the world. And even though I'm absolutely sure I am correct, then it is really just a point of view, it is just an opinion. When I first arrived at the monastery in Hubei province, by Nanachan, 45 years ago, then I couldn't understand this at all. And people would say, well, that's your opinion, that's your point of view. I said, no, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. And they would say, well, it's your opinion that that's a fact. These monks are really annoying. So I just got to tell these Buddhists are idiots. They don't understand the fact when they hear one. Because as I said, I had lots of information. I could remember things and explain things. I could explain anything and everything. And then about 6 weeks later, I had a kind of an insight where I realized, I'm seeing things differently now than I did when I first arrived. So what I thought was true then, I see is not true now. So if that changed, what does that say about what I think now? Oh, maybe that can change too. Oh. So I'm not always right. I don't always have the understanding exactly how the world is. My thoughts, my opinions are naturally limited. They're just take shape in my mind. They're one point of view. Like if I sit here, I point my finger, I say I'm pointing to the left. And when you look from your side, you say, no, actually you're pointing to the right. But no, I can see my finger pointing to the left. A very easy example, but isn't it amazing how often we do that? So in terms of life here at Banyadan International School and for strengthening communication, then I feel these are very helpful principles, because what they do is, if we really use this we are able to be more compassionate and be more forgiving, forgiving of others and forgiving of ourselves. And so that leads to a greater quality of peace and harmony between us. So I've spoken for around half an hour now, so if there's questions that people have, I'm very happy to make some responses. So I need to get a microphone.
Thank you, Ajahn. So, don't be shy if you have any question.
There's a hand there.
Yes.
Thank you, Ajahn, for coming to our school. Regarding your talk, you said that, okay, so on social media, we see a lot of people who often try to enforce their ideologies on others. So if we meet these people in real life, how do you suggest we try to communicate with them?
Good question. Social media didn't exist when I grew up. Well, there was newspapers and letters that you wrote by hand. It's an interesting area. I don't have a lot of personal experience, but being judged by others or criticized by others, and as we might see it unfairly, we can't really control where other people are at, what they say about us. But when you meet in real life, then I would say that the best thing to do is just being true to yourself. To try and to jump in and explain yourself, which again I have had a strong tendency to do. Let me explain. Let me tell you, your perception of things is not true, not real, not the same as mine. But the energy that we can use to sort of jump in and explain everything can just be bringing more agitation and division into the picture. And so that if you are able to meet with someone who's been criticizing you or causing difficulty through social media, then be mindful of the contact. What's the situation that you're meeting in, and to be able to just be true to your own perspective and say, and not accusing them of being wrong, but saying, well, when I read your words that you wrote, then it had this effect on me, and I see that was painful because of ABC, and so that you're not entering into a conflict with that person because of what they said, but you're speaking about how it has affected you. And if you speak from a place of honesty and some straightforwardness, then that has its own message. That if you're coming from a place of defensiveness, or you're aggressive towards them, that just increases the sense of division. So if we want to resolve conflict, then that's the kind of thing I would suggest. So it's not so much through social media, but I've lived in community, in monasteries for 45 years, and so even without Facebook and WhatsApp and messaging and all this and Snapchat and so on that people talk through these days, you still have misunderstandings and misjudgments, and that when you would meet with someone from your own monastery or someone from another place who's been critical of you, that meeting that face to face, the less that you've prepared what you're going to say, the less that you're just sort of going into the meeting with mindfulness and compassion, and then you're responding to the moment as you speak together with them, then that's very helpful. If you've got a script of things that you're going to say, then and then when you meet, you're just sort of delivering your script. There isn't really any communication. But for there to be communication, it needs to go in two directions. There needs to be a sort of transmission and a reception. If I'm just broadcasting to you how you're wrong, and I've already got that in my mind, I'm not even really meeting you. You're just sort of a target. And if there's going to be any resolution, there needs to be communication. So that means that we need to listen and to have a sense of attuning to the time, the place, the situation. So it's not easy to do, but and I find in terms of community dynamics, so not so much from social media, again, but just living in community with lots of other people, that the more we can learn to listen and really receive where people are at, then we're able, when we respond, we're coming from a place of what we call empathy. You're able to connect with them, and that can help move things towards some kind of resolution. It can be the case that the person who's criticizing you or attacking you, they don't really care about you at all. They're not really interested in communication. They're just sort of looking for a target, and you happen to be a convenient target. So if you try to communicate and you realize, well, this person is really not accessible, not really interested, okay, leave it alone. Don't waste your energy, as it were, because that is not something that's workable in that situation. But you can't really tell that until you're actually in a conversation. It's hard to be clear about that unless you're really so face to face with someone. Does that make sense? Maybe one last thing I was talking about this yesterday. Being misjudged and misrepresented is a very high practice. So letting yourself be misjudged, misrepresented, and not sort of jumping in to try and fix it. To not react, but to take it in and to reflect on that, and then to respond in a mindful and spacious way. That takes a lot of effort, but it's very, very helpful to do. So I've often said that in recent years, that being misjudged and misrepresented is one of the higher, more sophisticated Dhamma practices, because it touches very deep and painful emotions, self-defense, and feeling hurt and wounded and rejected. So that takes a lot of effort to work with, but if we can work with that, then the results of that are very helpful.
Thank you.
There was a monk who confessed to me that he had critical feelings about me because he thought I was really avoiding all the work around the monastery. We just opened up a new monastery in California. There was a lot of physical work. But after a while, I realized I couldn't both look after all the teaching and administration and all the physical work too. So this monk confessed he thought I was work shy and was kind of grumbling and complaining about how I was lazy. And then a couple of years later, he found out that, or he heard that, oh no, Ajahn Amaro, it's impossible for him to be lazy. He's never been work shy in his life. Yeah, you're probably reading the situation incorrectly. So when he came and asked me, I said, yeah, I deliberately set aside helping out on the work scene because I couldn't do everything. And I decided that even though people are critical of that, I need to do it this way because there's not enough hours in the day for me to do everything. And so that, but I spend as much time as I can, looking after the community, looking after everything. And so he was really apologetic that, wow, I had such negative feelings about you, and it was really misguided all this time, so please forgive me. So by me not kind of jumping in and straightening him out, because I could feel the sort of vibes coming from him, scowling at me. I was answering emails instead of carrying lumber through the forest. But I thought, okay, well, I won't jump in and explain. And then the result was a lot of respect and friendship a few years later.
Thank you.
Any other questions, please?
Yes, don't be shy, please. Students, learn.
There's a hand there.
This is going to be a little unrelated to the talk, but what was his relationship with his mother afterwards?
Could you say that again?
What was his relationship with his mother afterwards?
I can't hear the question clearly.
What was his relationship with his mother afterwards?
The speakers are muffling the sounds.
What was his relationship with his mother afterwards?
I don't know. And what was my relationship with that monk afterwards? The one who was criticizing me? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's for the monk.
Yeah, so, well, he was appreciative that I hadn't sort of got into a state of conflict with him. I just let him misunderstand me. And that it's been very sort of friendly and respectful ever since. And so I reflect on that very often as a very good result of that kind of that approach. Because my strong tendency was to sort of jump in and explain myself. There's a line from the teachings of Confucius, Confucius, which says, those who justify themselves do not convince. So the very energy of self-justification makes a communication more difficult. So at being patient, letting yourself be misunderstood, and then waiting for the things to emerge naturally, I found that was a very helpful way to proceed. So yeah, we've been a very friendly and respectful relationship ever since.
Yeah, any question? Yes.
Sorry, the microphone is not really great. Does monkhood propagate a gradual ego death?
I would say if it's used in the right way, yes. But not so much ego death, because that's something that's so painful and difficult, but rather ego transparency is realized. So egos are useful. I mean, for your teachers and staff, they've got name tags, you can remember who they are. You each have names. So names, egos, they have their value. We have evolved as a human society, and the ego is part of that evolution for us to function with each other. It's where the ego is taken as some kind of ultimate reality, then trouble begins. So, if there's Ajahn Amaro, can you give a talk? I said, there is no Ajahn Amaro. Then it gets very complicated. So if I need to be Ajahn Amaro, I'll get up in the seat and do that. So ego is useful. It just means the I feeling. But if it's recognized as being transparent, as insubstantial, there's a form there, but nothing solid, nothing permanent, nothing absolute, then we can use that ego and our personality and the personal qualities in a very functional, very useful, very beneficial way. But ego death is more like where there is attachment to the ego and it just failed or something. And you just got blamed, criticized, rejected, and it's that feeling. And that's what most of us are really afraid of, from the egocentric perspective. If we use Buddhist meditation and monastic life as a way of looking through that, seeing through that, then we can use those forms, but they are not an obstruction to us. So sometimes Ajahn Chah, our teacher, would say, in an assembly like this, there is no monk here. There are no people, there are no women, there are no men, there are no girls, no boys. These are just karmic formations, coming and going and changing. We say woman, man, pupil, teacher, monk, layperson, girl, boy. These are just conventions that we add to our perceptions. There isn't anything absolutely there. And so that to use the monkhood, monastic life, skillfully, then as Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Chah's senior Western disciple and our teacher in the West, said, as an ordination ceremony, when someone was becoming a monk, said, no one should become a monk in order to be a monk. It's a kind of strange thing to say. As an ordination, this isn't a new identity. This isn't a career choice. This is a vehicle that you get on, getting on a bus or a train or a plane to get someplace. It's not an identity. So you don't become a monk in order to be a monk. You become a monk in order to realize enlightenment.
It's time for one more question. And teachers are invited to, and parents to ask questions as well.
If there's no more questions, one more thing that comes to mind, particularly with many languages, is that it can't just be attachment to an opinion. It can also be actually mishearing what somebody else has said. That they said one thing and you heard something else. They didn't mean that at all. But we can hear something, like trying to understand what that young gentleman was saying, the microphone muffling the sound. It's like, I can't get the words out of the kind of the blur of the sound. So sometimes we hear something and we hear what the person said is not what we hear. So another story from the early years of our community in England, one of the novices, Ajahn Sumedho had been receiving people and talking for quite some time. And one of the novices came up to him and said, Tanajan, would you like some tea? And he said, love some. Right? And so then the novice went scurrying off, went to the kitchen, was away 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. And Ajahn Sumedho was wondering with the rest of us that were there, what happened to the tea? It doesn't take that long to make a cup of tea. 40 minutes go by, and then the novice came back in kind of covered in sweat and very agitated. He said, I'm terribly sorry, Ajahn, we haven't got any lapsang souchong. What? He said, well, you asked for lapsang. Lapsang souchong tea? You asked for some lapsang souchong tea? No, I said love some. So sometimes it's as simple as that. What one person says is not what somebody else hears. And so the novice was suffering desperately, looking through every corner of Chithurst house, trying to find this particular kind of lapsang souchong tea. And so it wasn't what was needed in the first place. So that's really good to bear in mind that if you didn't hear something clear, it's like this young gentleman, like, can you say that again? I didn't get that. And so if you hear something and you're not quite sure what's being said, or it sounds a bit strange, it's quite okay to say, what did you say? Or can you say that again? Or what I heard was such and such. And is that what you meant? Another example from monastic life and living in California. So there was one of the novices had a very strong sort of determined streak. When he wanted to do something, then he'd get very, very focused on doing things in that way. And so he asked permission to do something of myself and Ajahn Pasna, who were two co-abbats. And we said, no, we don't agree, you can't do that. And so then a day or so later, it turns out he followed his own initiative and done what he wanted to do. And so then he kind of called him and said, hey, 2 days ago, when you asked if you could do that, then we both said, no, we don't give permission for that job to be done. And so how come you did it? He said, oh, I thought you meant no, you didn't disagree. And we kind of looked at him, what? No, there's two of us. They're both very forthright characters. And when you asked it, can I do this? We said, no. He said, well, I thought you meant no, you didn't object. Wow, that's amazing. And then a few weeks later, a similar thing happened again. This is incredible. This guy is extraordinary. You say no, and he hears yes. So, again, I hope you don't have to go through this procedure. So I developed a particular, format with this dear novice. He's now an Ajahn, actually, so he did stay in the community. So I said, he would ask something, and I'd say, no. And then I would say to him, what did I just say? And he would say, you just said no. And when I say no, I mean, no, you are not given permission to do that. What have I just said? You have said I haven't got permission to do that. So what do you understand to be the case? I haven't got permission to do that. Okay? We on the same page? Right. So it was kind of ridiculous. But sometimes that sort of way of walking through things to make sure that you are on the same page, then you can live harmoniously together. But if we don't communicate clearly, we don't listen to each other, then we end up creating more and more conflict. And the essence of, in many ways, the essence of compassion, living harmoniously, is listening, learning to listen and to really receive where others are at, and then from that place of listening, then we can act in a skillful and appropriate way.
Ajahn, I do have one more question. So here in school, there are a lot of opportunities for collaborative group work, and so a lot of opinions and perspectives are present. What would you suggest to our students if we have two students working together on a project and both students are wholly convinced that their path is the correct path, and they're finding trouble compromising? Both parties are unable to compromise and think that this way is correct or that way is correct. Could you speak to this a little bit?
Yes, well, it does happen in the monastery too. So sitting down together and to say, well, this is interesting. So, if you are listening, so can you explain to me why your idea seems best to you and why you think mine won't work or it's not so good? And then, and so you listen to them, and then the other person says similarly, okay, so why do you think your idea is better? What do you think is wrong with mine? So you're exploring the territory together. So it becomes a collaboration in looking at the field. And almost always what happens is that you realize that some aspect of the picture you hadn't taken into account. Or you think, I thought the priority was that we were going to be in this, it had to happen in this room, or that it was going to be at this time. Oh, no, it could be anywhere. Oh, really? Oh. So just exploring the territory together. So laying aside the kind of, I'm right, you're wrong attitude. Just exploring the territory together. And then out of that, then usually you can find a way forward. If it's devolved into a kind of ego battle, the mediation is helpful. Okay. To have someone who's not involved in the kind of choice, who both people can trust and can relate to, come into the picture, and then you have a mediator who is sort of the kind of translating agent, and that can be very helpful. I was at a process meeting once in California. I lived for a long time. And there was a big conflict in this community of Buddhist teachers. And they had a facilitator, a mediator who came in, and she was absolutely brilliant. She was a genius. I don't know how she trained and what she did, but so she was new to most of the people there. Hardly anybody knew her from before. She didn't know the individuals or the group dynamics. But as the people were speaking in the group and expressing their perspectives on this conflict, she stood behind each one of us one by one. And then after we'd spoken for a bit, she voiced what was the unspoken subtext. She kind of put into words what she felt was not being said. And she was amazingly accurate. Extraordinary. It's kind of spooky at certain points. Wow. She doesn't know any of us, but she's reading the situation really well. And so it was she helped the group to find a way forward, because at a certain point, one of the main people who was in the conflict, she said that 100% of the problem was due to the other person and 0% was due to her. And then this facilitator said, "Did you hear what you just said?" "Yes." And do you want to stand by that? Yes. Every aspect of this which is problematic comes from the other person, none of it from me. It's entirely their fault. And then it was this, and then having that spoken out loud, the whole group had kind of, oh, that kind of rigidity is the cause of the conflict. And then, because everyone could hear it, then okay, so we need to find a whole different track to get a way forward. It's not about the issue that we're discussing. It's about the way this person's holding on to their rights. If that's not too psychological. But that kind of skillful mediation, someone coming in and helping move things along, can be a very simple and straightforward way of working with